This week, Ron Gula joins us to update us on his journey in the startup world, to give you a little sneak preview. Michael and I are going to talk about some startup security news, including meaningful VC exits, building a startup accelerator at a large company, Fort insights from analyzing 5,000 plus cap tables. That sounds absolutely fascinating, Michael. My story for this week that I want to hit is 11 free tools and services that every first-time entrepreneur should use. All that and more on this edition of Startup Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by Tenable Network Security, creators of Nessus, the world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous security monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at tenable.com. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand via Chromecast, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, PC, or your mobile device. IT Pro TV's premium membership grants access to all courses, transcripts, virtual machine labs, and transcender practice exams. Corporate and group pricing are available. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the life of your account, visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested them? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Startup Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, on the lines via Skype with a nice, fresh new camera. Look at Michael Santarcangelo. Wow.
I got a new camera. I got a new microphone. I feel like I'm doing play-by-play or color commentary.
Your sticky notes are straight, which is awesome.
Without a ruler. I did those without a ruler. It's I was just taking a team through it this week. What you'll see on the other side, this is my next quarter, and this side is like my next 3 weeks.
It's very, very analog of you, Michael.
It gives me something to look at every day. So, when those distractions creep in and you're like, oh, I look at that and I go, nope, no, I got to get those things done.
Nice.
And it's working actually. I'm kind of pleased with the way it's working. I still have all my digital stuff online, but that's the way that it works. And so we got the new camera, we got better sound. Last week kind of pushed me to make some changes.
That's good. You look good and you sound good.
Thanks.
Just a quick announcement from itpro.tv. Cybersecurity Analyst Plus, CCNA Cyber Ops, ITIL Operations Support, Analysis, Penetration Testing, and more have gotten updates in the IT Pro TV network. They're still honoring their membership upgrade, so make sure you visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30 for a 30% off discount for life. I don't think there's any other announcements, so we're going to jump right into our interview for this show with none other than Ron Gula, who actually got his start as a penetration tester for the NSA. Was the CEO of Network Security Wizards, and most probably know Ron from his time as CEO and co-founder of Tenable Network Security. And we'll dip a little bit into Ron's past, but also talk about Ron's new venture. Ron, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Hey, Mike. Glad to be here.
It's nice to have you on this show, Ron. This is your first appearance on this show. It's very, very nice to have you. Ron was and probably still will be a frequent guest on Paul Security Weekly. I think our first interview was 2006. It was really early on in the history. Ron's got the vintage mug that he's drinking from. Very nice. Very nice.
I haven't received my Security Weekly cigar set yet, though. That's not come to mail yet.
It's to talk about startups and such. It's really hard now with FDA regulations to release a cigar. Like, regulations came down and it makes it very, very difficult. Not to say that it won't happen, but it just makes it a lot more difficult. So it's a good idea. We should do that. Ron, let's talk about kind of your first startup was Network Security Wizards, correct?
Correct.
So
big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. Network Security Wizards was a cool name, and the product was called Dragon. Actually, Marty Rush, the guy that did Snort, actually came up with the Dragon name.
Interesting. So in what year was that in?
It was 1999 we got started.
Wow. So what were some of the differences back then versus now in terms of doing a security startup?
Well, the funny thing is when we did that startup, we didn't really use any venture capital. We didn't talk to the local county. We didn't talk to people. We didn't go through an accelerator, that kind of stuff. But within 18 months, we had the product deployed in the DoD at places like AOL, and they were big back then. And we had acquisition offers from some of the major big players out there. Now you go to RSA and there's 1,000 companies there, and the ecosystem of the cybersecurity landscape has really just exploded over the last couple 2 decades, I guess.
And then, Ron, for our listeners, what drove you to create Tenable Network Security? So when we did Network Security Wizards, we sold to Enterasys Networks, and I got to go there and work for a couple years and learn about two-tier channel distribution, international intellectual property issues, skewing services, all working with partners, all that kind of stuff. And after a couple years there, I kind of got the itch to basically start something else. And at the time, there was the SIM market, all the people who are doing log aggregation. But back in that time, early 2002, there was people who used many, many vulnerability tools. And of course, Nessus is the world's best, vulnerability scanner. Thank you, Tenable, to sponsor this episode. But at the time, people had one tool for Oracle, one tool for maybe a version of Solaris, one tool for a router. They had open source, they had commercial, they had multiple different tools. And so the idea originally at Tenable was to bring all that together. And we quickly evolved from there. And speaking of that evolution, did you know from the start? Because I know a lot of people listening that either have startups or want to do startups, and they've got revenue goals in mind. Did you have a prediction that someday you would leave when Tenable would be a $100 million plus revenue company?
I think I'm on record saying I never wanted to. Do things like run a public company, run a company bigger than 50 people, ever deal with international sales and things like that. I like the startup stuff. But at the same time, I tell a lot of the startup companies I'm working with, don't lock yourself into one plan. But you got to have that swim lane. You got to have that vision. And the original vision at Tenable was to measure your risk and measure your security. And 14 years later, we saw the birth of PCI. We saw the birth of frameworks. We saw the huge debate between pen testing and security auditors. And now, of course, the incident response teams look a whole lot like pen testing teams. The market has really, really moved on. But the original concept of Tenable, having an obtainable and defendable network, is still true to this day.
Michael, do you have questions for Ron? I know I'm very curious as to your questions for Ron, because Ron and I have obviously known each other for quite a while now. So,
well, I mean, there's two things that I think are interesting just based on your experience, which is how much did you learn the first time around that you were able to bring into Tenable, and how much changed then between that, right? And then the follow-up question that I'm also curious about, because you just talked about never wanted to be big, never wanted to be public, never wanted all those things. And sometimes what we see in a startup is some people don't make those transitions very well, but you did. So I'm kind of curious what that journey was like.
Yeah, so a lot of what I did before Network Security Wizards, I did for other people, right? So I worked at the NSA as a pen tester, so I got to learn the hard way about measuring risk and doing pen testing. I got to work at BBN where we did things like honeypots and quickly development of tools for a variety of government customers. But I kind of learned how to roll out products and write proposals and demonstrate products to customers. And then I got to go to work at U.S. Internetworking, was really one of the first cloud type companies in Annapolis, Maryland. And I got to learn about how to talk to customers about, look, frankly, we know better than you how to host your data. And, that's a rough conversation back then. How you say that and how you sell that is kind of interesting. And then, of course, doing Network Security Wizards, selling that, seeing Enterasys Networks competing against people like Cisco. By the time we started Tenable, I had seen a lot. And so a lot of the decisions we made about growing, a lot of the decisions we made about, what went into the product, it was because we didn't have to really debate about it a whole lot. We kind of knew it from experience, whether it came to pricing. What does a penetration tester? What would they pay for Nessus? What kind of value would we have to? That's a pretty natural type of discussion to have. And a lot of times when we work with startups, if they don't have that background, that's when we say, look, you really got to get some advisors. You got to get some board members. You got to hire some product. You got to have people in your organization who know the customers that you're dealing with and the problem first set. That's one of the first things I look for as a potential investors in a company. Do the founders, does the team have a sense of what the market is and what the market wants?
So does that mean so let's stand out for a second, because that's an interesting thread we've had recently, which is, do you value? In fact, I think what Paul and I have been kind of vectoring in on is if you have that experience yourself as a founder, or if you have that experience in your team, great, run with it. But if you don't, you've got to acquire it. You've got to get it either through an advisor or a hire or something else. So when you're looking at that, do you tend to stay then looking at investments where you can assess their knowledge, whether it's they can talk a good game or they actually understand it?
Yeah, you can fix product. You can't fix teams. If you have a team that's got the wrong product with the wrong approach and the wrong pricing or the wrong marketing or the wrong message, you can fix that. But if the team is not the right team, you can replace the team, and there's some venture capital firms out there that have no problem going in and gutting all the founders and firing the head of sales and things like that, because that's not my style. I'm very entrepreneur focused, so I tend to invest in the entrepreneur who's got the right technology or the close enough technology is the way I look at it.
And speaking of which, Ron, when you were departing Tenable, there was much rumbling about what's Ron Gula going to do. And that official announcement came recently in the past couple of weeks. So why don't you share with our listeners what you're up to?
Yeah, so contrary to popular belief, I've not been to Trump Tower or anything like that. We're launching Gula Tech Adventures, and it's a fund where we're investing just like another venture capital firm would, but our focus is really what I would consider seed investing or Series A in investing. And that really means, entrepreneurial cybersecurity startups, 2 to 10 people who maybe have come out of an incubator, maybe it's their second or third time doing a company, and they're looking for a little bit of capital and perhaps some advice. And then when I say we, actually my wife, Cindy Gula, she was actually involved not only with Network Security Wizards, but she was the first employee at Tenable Network Security, and was one of the keys to our growth and success at both endeavors.
That's fantastic. So your Gula Tech Adventures is not focused on the incubation so much as it is the seed and Series A, correct?
In all honesty, where I live in Maryland, I looked really hard at starting an incubator. My wife and I spent some time with a lot of companies around here that are doing incubation, whether it's acceleration, helping people training basic, and that just wasn't our we weren't drawn to that. And we were really, really drawn to the seed level Series A. Can we help a company get off the ground, get to profitability, get to their minimum viable product, that sort of thing. So that's really where I think we can help people avoid the mistakes that we may have made and, succeed.
Ron, you always had a very keen sense for security companies and which ones were more interesting than the other. And over the years, you and I have had lots of conversations about new technologies or new solutions. And you always had like this short list of, this company's doing this. Are there some tips for, Michael and I, right, to be able to track those, but also for people doing startups, like how do they find their niche and kind of get on your radar or other investors' radar?
Well, one of the reasons we did the website was so we're easy to find. And so it's gulatechadventures.com. And, we have ways to contact us. But we're also present in a lot of these, incubation days. I was at the Mach 37. They had a launch day late last year, for example. And we try to be visible. But as far as, what we're trying to look for and what's interesting, the rules are still kind of the same, even though I'm going to give a talk in another month called The Rules Have Changed. But, you have confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So if you have a better way to transform doing those things, whether it's in the cloud, on a mobile device, on a desktop, great. Change the world. Go out and conquer. I'm working with a number of companies who think that they're going to be really big and literally change the way we do security. On the other hand, and not to take anything away from that, there's a lot of processes that we've been doing for a long time. Network intrusion detection, log aggregation, running a security operations center. If you have a way to use automation to save money, to do it cheaper, to do it faster, you might not change the way the world does cybersecurity, but you're going to be able to have a very, very successful business. So anytime you can do things in either of those areas, I get interested. And I get excited because I think there's still a lot of opportunity for not only people to have successful cybersecurity companies, but to actually help people save money or actually be secure.
One of the things that I'm actually struggling with right now is, and not just in my own venture, but in looking at other companies as well, is I feel like enterprises specifically want a solution that solves multiple problems and does a lot of things, and they want to buy from one vendor. However, a lot of startups, even with some funding, can really only focus on a niche or a specific problem. And I feel like a lot of companies do that really well, but it's a smaller part of the picture. So in your investing, like, how do you factor that in? And then what's your recommendation for folks buying products in terms of going with a niche product or going with a larger solution?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different go-to-markets, right? You've got large enterprise, you've got commodity, you've got services, you've got B2B. There's so many different ways that you can add value to an organization's ability to have business confidence in what they're doing, or reduce their cost of demonstrating compliance. That it's really interesting. Now, on the enterprise, you mentioned that I do think that enterprise products need to have a lot of features. But if you think about something like the Gartner Magic Quadrant, or all of the controls that are involved with PCI or SANS, the Center for Internet Security, critical security controls, even the NIST cybersecurity framework, an enterprise is not going to buy one product that does all of that stuff. So we've seen a lot of enterprise products that are rewarded for being best in class. CyberArk, for example, probably the most successful company in identity management. If they got into antivirus, if they got into log aggregation, the market's probably not going to reward them. Splunk, awesome. Log aggregation, log analysis, business intelligence. If they got into doing things like firewalls or something like that. So my point is in the enterprise, people tend to reward organizations and companies who are really good at what they do and have all the features that an enterprise organization would demand. Now, when you go SMB, when you go small, when you go cloud, those rules get flipped around. You can have a SIEM in the cloud, and people seem to think it's awesome if you can do carbon black type telemetry in addition to the logs and do some network forensics. It's sort of that lower end, and I don't mean higher or low, but the opposite of large scale enterprise. There's less budgets, there's less people, so the more boxes you can check in your solution, the more likely a customer might buy what you're doing just because of price. And every vertical is slightly different, right? Energy, finance, government. There's different shades of those type of things. So there's plenty of opportunity because everybody's getting hacked. Everybody has a budget for cyber, and there's a lot of competition to outdo the other folks. This is capitalism at its best.
When you invest in companies, is it primarily cloud-based solutions? And do you find that the market is responding better to solely cloud-based solutions versus on-premise?
So when I invest, I'm interested in a number of things. Can I work with the team, and can I make a difference? And is it going to be a good investment? Now, is it going to be the next Uber? I would like to think every company I invest in is going to be that. But the reality is a lot of companies that are going to RSA, for example, they might be a great addition to, somebody like a Cisco, somebody like a Microsoft. But as far as cloud versus on-prem or service versus perpetual, there's still a lot of opportunities. I just came from a meeting with a potential investment where they're still kind of in perpetual, but they're moving to subscription. So as much as the internet and people like to talk about how everything's moving to the cloud, there's a lot of people that still have legacy, large Windows networks, and solving security problems for that network is just as exciting as solving security problems for people who have 100% SaaS and Amazon Rackspace Azure development applications.
Ron, in your opinion, what are some of the elements in a great pitch?
Brevity. If somebody can do a pitch in one slide, that's what I love. I mean brevity, focus. If they can tell me the problem, what they do, why they're unique. If they can sort of withhold themselves from doing the background pitch or telling me why the director of engineering is so good at managing people. Those are things, the details, and those are the things you get excited about after the pitch. But brevity is the best thing of a pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like in a?
Go ahead, Michael.
I'm sorry, Paul. Would you like? I've been doing a lot of work lately on understanding the sales process and cold calling. Would you liken the pitch then? It's almost like to that cold call. You've got a very short window to show that you can bring value, differentiate yourself, and get interest in more conversation.
Mm-hmm. And if you can do that in one slide, I tend to appreciate that. Now, in practice, a great pitch is like 3 slides, 4 slides.
I was just going to say, yeah. But what I think what you're also pointing out is if somebody's taken the time to distill and they've thought it through and they carefully use their words, that also shows that they're pretty tight, right? I mean, that's because if you're looking for somebody that understands the customer, understands the marketplace, is a well put together team. So when you see a pitch, are you usually just expecting one person to do the pitch, or if it's a team, are you kind of evaluating how they operate together, or is that a secondary thing? Just show me your idea first. If it's interesting, then we'll go forward.
So it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of different things that can happen with a company who's offering products. Perhaps they had to pivot. Perhaps there's regulations that have changed. Like for example, we saw FanDuel, kind of come and go last year. So companies who were getting into online sports betting, maybe they had to do a switch in their go-to-market, so their pitch is changing. Maybe there's some technology there, and the technology does something, but the pitch is completely wrong. And so my point is that I would love to see the perfect pitch is one slide and it's a hook, line, sinker, and let me invest. But the reality is maybe I can help a company not only by providing them some capital, but helping them with their pitch, or thinking about adjacent markets, or thinking about ways to take the technology that they have and talk about it where there's a different buyer. Maybe sometimes I get excited because I know that this company just needs a little bit of help, and it would be a perfect acquisition for some other company. And that's so as an investor, I'm looking for opportunity. But people ask, how can I do a sexy pitch? Boy, brevity in one slide, and try to have all the nuance so you can get differentiation, demonstration of market value and market command, and just some level of excitement. Those are the kind of things I like to see.
You know what I'm loving is listening to you explain that. You're demonstrating why it's so important for somebody seeking money to also do diligence on the other side. Somebody who needs some of that, what you're offering them with your experience, your background, and your current focus is, hey, these are the situations in which I fit, and that's really helpful for them to start to figure out how to better pitch you or not. That feels exciting to me in this space, because I think that there's a lot of people in security that have really good ideas, but probably need a little bit of that help. And it sounds like with your experience, you'd like the perfect pitch out of the gate, but you're also willing to listen a little bit and say, oh, there's something here, and maybe see if you can polish it off a little bit, and then help them along the way. That I don't know. I like that. That's exciting. I'm excited that you're doing that, Ron.
And there's all these kind of analogies of, when you invest in a company, they might offer you a board seat. They might say, let's have you as an advisor. But the reality is can you have a conversation, and can you get some mutual feedback there, because as much as I've done this for 20 years, I don't know everything. So if I'm asking a dumb question, well, how do they handle a dumb question? Or if I'm asking a question and they don't know the answer to that, or they've never thought about that, how do they respond to criticism, perhaps in their go-to-market or things like that? And that's a very personal thing, and not everybody is a fit together. So I'm also looking for, is there an opportunity to work together? Is there an opportunity to have two-way feedback? Because I learn stuff from every one of the companies I'm working with, every time I talk to them. Yeah.
I've seen this a lot on Shark Tank, right? It's usually Mark Cuban and others too that make the decision. Like, I kind of feel like he feels like there would be too much work involved in getting the company where it needs to be. Where are your thresholds in that, Ron? Like, where do you see yourself as a role in helping companies, and then like, what's the cutoff where you're like, well, maybe that's not the right fit?
Right. So there's a couple interesting things. As a potential investor, I'm not a potential CEO. I tell people right away, I'm not looking to get back, and I did that for 20 years. I'm not looking to get back in that seat. So if somebody needs a CEO, if somebody needs a management team, and that's the thing that's holding them back. Maybe they're a brilliant technical person, but we got to find that person a CEO. That might be a requirement before I invest.
Gotcha.
Another one could be, look, they've got a great technology. They tend to know what they're doing, but they really need capital, right? They need $4 million. They need a real Series A. I might hold back and say, look, I'm not going to put any money in at all, and I'll try to participate maybe with the Series A or B, or the Series A, when somebody else puts that capital in and commits to supporting that company with the network of that. So as much as people say, hey, it's Ron Gula, he's been in the industry, he knows everybody. The reality is if you have a VC who's managing a 50 to 500 million or $1 billion fund, they've got teams of people who can do things. Like, for example, Insight, they helped us a lot after they did the investment in Tenable. They literally had dinners where they would organize 20 or 30 CIOs to show up, and we got to speak at and things like that. So there's a lot of benefits that we're trying to have in this type of ecosystem. But those are some of the things we'll hold back on if we don't see a complete picture.
So what other kind of benefits and advice do you give the companies that you invest in, like once you've finalized the investment, and just break that down in terms of like business process or marketing or just general introductions? Like, do you have a kind of standard list of things that you help your companies that you're investing in?
Yeah, I try to go for the next easy thing. Like something that doesn't work is like, okay, hey Ron, we're ready to go to market. Can you introduce us to 100 customers? Because that's not what I'm there for. Like I tell people usually I'm up front, who we invest in, and I'm a little bit I'm getting more public about it, but I'm not sort of the number one salesperson for the folks that we do. But if somebody's like, for example, if somebody's in an evaluation at a bank and I know the CISO, I'll call the CISO and say, hey, look, did you know that this company's in there? I don't know if they're on your radar yet. Because that's what you really need when you're starting out. You need good, solid customers and real feedback. And what you don't need is somebody, if they're evaluating 3 cloud SIM companies and, they're just testing the water. I would love to know that before, a startup with limited time and energy, spends a lot of money and effort, going in there. At the same time, there's so many other ways to be useful when it comes to introducing people to marketing. For example, if somebody doesn't want to hire a marketing person, what could we do? What are you trying to get? Are you trying to get leads? Do you want a speaking event where we can get people to come in? There's a lot of opportunity to just participate in things like the CCDC, in different types of events, all across the country.
Recruiting is a big challenge, I think, for startups as well. How do you help the companies you invest in finding talent?
Yeah, two ways. So the one pitch I do is saying, if anybody says, well, what kind of regrets do I have from doing Security Wizards and Tenable, it's not going fast enough. So the way that manifests with recruiting is I tell people, think about the org chart for the next level. Like, well, how do you envision the company 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And then what's holding you back from having that org chart today? Because a lot of times what people do is they're opportunistic. They hire a great engineer who's really a product manager who's also doing QA, And what happens is they get successful with having a mix of roles that overlap. And I say, look, when you think about recruiting, especially when you're going out and raising that Series A, if you can say, here's the org chart we're putting in place. These are the type of people we need. Here's the people we have now. Here's how it fills in. It changes your focus and your mindset, and it makes it a lot easier to do the recruiting because you have very, very specific, roles and expectations of what these things are. Once you have that, boy, it's a lot easier to articulate to somebody how you want them to work in your organization and what your organization as a startup is going to look like 2 years and 3 years from now. Just having that focus of knowing what you want really makes recruiting a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Michael, more questions for Ron?
I'm soaking this in. Here's the one I have. Listening to you, the difference between seed round versus an A or something else, it sounds like you don't have a hard or fast rule, but would it be fair to say that if somebody's coming to you for a seed round, you don't mind putting in the time, but you've got to be excited about them as a team, feel like you can contribute, and really like the problem they're solving and their solution to it? Whereas as an A round, if someone else has helped them get to that point where they can see it and then you can see it, you're a little bit more excited. Is that a fair way to explain the difference?
Yeah, I mean, the difference between seed and A is really, you're getting revenue, you're getting some customers. Usually by the time you're A lot of people who invest want to see $1 million in revenue or $5 million in revenue. It depends on the market and what you're doing. But there's the transition from A to B. Now remember, this is a guy who didn't raise any money for his first company and waited 10 years to raise money for his second company. So I love very much also companies who are thinking about just getting profitable and just growing the company organically. And that's a completely different conversation. I'm having that conversation with a lot of people. But, if you're going to have to go out and build that org chart like I was talking about, you really, you can't just print money. You've got to go and either build that knowing what revenue you got coming in or get an investor who's going to give you some, some capital to do that. Where I kind of am pulling back from is if somebody wants to do a B round or a C round and they're just raising $50 million or, Silence, they just raised $100 million. I'm not going to add a lot from a capital point of view, but, to advise or getting involved with somebody at that stage, that's a very, very big commitment. One of the interesting things about seed round and A round, they don't have that many resources, so you're not on the phone with them every day. So I can be a lot more effective with a broader.
That's interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the big reasons I'm focusing on this area here, because I've had a lot of people say, "Hey, Ron, let's go raise, a lot of money." The biggest number somebody's thrown out is half a billion dollars, and there's funds like that out there. And some of them come from people in industry, but very rarely do you have a principal at those funds who's an ex-CEO of a public cybersecurity company or a company the size of Tenable. But I wouldn't want to do that because it takes a lot of time to advise somebody who's perhaps pre-IPO or breaking $100 million in revenue. There's just so many moving parts at scale. That's not something that I'm drawn to. I'm really drawn to the people who are starting out $1 million to $5 million in revenue and that sort of
thing. So, Ron, a lot of people listening are like, "Oh, I want to pitch Ron." I'm not sure what your schedule looks like, but obviously they can go to your website and contact you. Is that correct?
Yeah, brevity. And if they can fit it into a tweet, that's even better, right?
Yeah. Nice. I like it.
So, just for anybody who does want to do that, so we're really trying to focus on cybersecurity. So, like for example, we've been pitched data center cooling, great company. Somebody wanted to just save energy in data centers. I'm all for that. That's not my area of expertise. Don't want to do that. So that's I'm trying to be fairly disciplined about sticking to what we know and doing that. But if anybody who wants to contact me, go to Gula Tech Adventures. It's an investor@gula.tech. Send the note. If you're on LinkedIn with me, link in that way. And really interested in doing that. And then we have a small list of the portfolio companies that we're working with there. And if you think you're competitive with them, maybe we don't want to talk to you. But a lot of people realize that there's more than one way to skin a cat, and even if you've got a competing type of solution, it still might be a different vertical or a different go-to-market that still would make sense.
Good advice. Ron, thank you very much for appearing on Startup Security Weekly.
And thank you guys for focusing on this. This is one of the resources I wish I had when I was starting out.
Excellent. Thanks, Ron. We'll be right back.